And this one's on raising the bar to go global, a panel discussion with corporate leaders, esteemed corporate leaders who've joined us very specially for this discussion. And it's my pleasure to introduce each of them on stage. Let me start off with the chairman of Jetwing Hotels and Travels, Mr. Hiran Cooray. He is the current chairman of Jetwing, a family-owned company which counts a storied 40-year history, ladies and gentlemen. His achievements are numerous and much acclaimed. Being educated at St. Joseph's College, Colombo, he's gone on to graduate from the University of North Carolina, having followed a general manager's course at Cornell University. He represented Sri Lanka on the board of directors of the Pacific Asia Travel Association, PATA, as well as being the immediate past chairman of the organization for 2010-2012. He was the chairman of the PATA Sri Lanka chapter 2003-2004 and president of the Tourist Hotels Association of Sri Lanka 2005 through to 8, and was recently appointed the alternate member of the UNWTO World Committee on Tourism Ethics for 2013 to 2017. He is currently serving for the second term as president of Tourist Hotels Association of Sri Lanka from 2014 to 2016. Today, he sits on the boards of the Sri Lanka Tourism Promotions Bureau. In addition, he holds over 50 directorships in various hotels and related companies, making him a much sought-after speaker and panelist, and we are indeed esteemed and privileged to have him here with us. Mr. Hiran Cooray, I'd like to invite you on stage, sir. Please give him a big hand, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. Our next panelist, ladies and gentlemen, is the Deputy Chairman of John Keells Holdings PLC and has been a member of the board for over 20 years. He's a director of several companies in the John Keells Group and is the chairman of Union Assurance. He's a member of the board of Slintech, a company established for the development of nanotechnology in Sri Lanka. He's also a member of the Tourism Advisory Committee appointed by the Minister of Tourism Development, member of the Advisory Committee for Investment Promotion appointed by the Minister of Development Strategy and Internal Trade. He has also served as the chairman of the Colombo Stock Exchange and Nations Trust Bank. He has a degree in economics and brings over 32 years of management experience to the table. Please join me in welcoming Ajit Gunewardene, Deputy Chairman, John Keells Holdings. She has over 20 years experience in general management and finance, both in Sri Lanka and overseas, and currently serves as Executive Chairperson of Dunamis Capital PLC and other Dunamis subsidiaries, and served as Managing Director of the group until September 2014. She was formerly the Finance Director at Janashakti Insurance, one of the leading insurers in the country, where she continues to hold a non-executive position. She's a fellow member of the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants of UK and holds a master's degree in business administration from the University of Cambridge, UK. It's my pleasure to invite on stage Ms. Manjula Mathews, Executive Chairperson, Dunamis Capital. Our next panelist is a member of the board of Carson's Cumberbatch, a listed holding company of a widely diversified group with businesses based in Sri Lanka as well as other parts of Asia. The group has extensive interests in palm oil-based products and plantations, beverages, leisure, and entertainment, to name a few. He functions as chief executive and board member of the group's brewery business, a position he has held since '91. He's also a director of the Sri Lanka Business Development Center. He's a former chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, vice chairman of the Employees Federation of Ceylon, and a commissioner of the Securities and Exchange Commission of Sri Lanka. He's an accountant by profession and is a fellow member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka. It's my pleasure to invite on stage Suresh Shah, director and CEO of Lion Brewery Ceylon PLC, as well as Ceylon Beverage Holdings. Thank you for joining us, sir. Our next panelist is the founder CEO of Brandix i3, a part of an $800 million Brandix group. He was educated in Malaysia, Brunei, and the UK, and now resides in Sri Lanka. At Brandix i3, he has already developed a corporate portfolio worth 25 billion US dollars and has grown Brandix i3 from a team of 45 in mid-2012 to a team of over 215 in 2015 based in the US, Sri Lanka, Hong Kong and Australia. He also championed the global partnership with one of the world's top 3 enterprise software providers, Infor. His passion for technology is built on a BSc in computer science, an MBA, and many enterprise application certifications. It's my pleasure to invite on stage founder CEO of Brandix i3, Arjuna Sirinanda. Moderating this session, ladies and gentlemen, will be a personality known all too well. He's busy at work. He's the managing director and chief executive of Enable, a technology company he founded in 2008 with 12 employees with the intention of making IT more business relevant. Today, with over 100 employees on board, the company is reinventing itself and refocusing resources on 3 core areas: connecting people and things, delivering business insights, and creating energy efficiency. Before Enable, he was the CEO of Millennium ESP. During his career spanning 25 years in the IT industry overseas and in Sri Lanka, he was privileged to have been part of several pioneering IT efforts in the country. It's my pleasure to invite on stage a gentleman who also leans towards the arts, a director and actor as well, Mr. Peter D. Almeida, Managing Director and Chief Executive, Enable. He'll be moderating the session. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, and I think we have, now it's 4:20 and we hope to finish at 5:15 as scheduled. So I don't want to take away the time for this wonderful panel we have. Collectively they represent about, I think, close to $2.5 to $3 billion worth of business. So I think you're extremely fortunate to have such eminent persons on the panel. To start things off, I'd like each of you folks to kindly, make a quick statement about what you think about this topic, raising the bar to go global, in the overall context of the theme today, which is breaking barriers, building bridges. First you, Hiran, would you like to share some thoughts, please?
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that we are finally getting an opportunity to, think global as well. I mean, earlier we were, many years ago, we were just thinking survival. I mean, I'm talking on behalf of tourism because that's the industry that I'm involved in, and that's the industry that went through the most difficulties until 2009. Now we are looking at a level playing field. We are being compared with most of the other destinations in the world, and there is now an opportunity for Sri Lankans to invest overseas, to bring in investment from overseas into Sri Lanka, to create world-class products. I mean, if you talk of Sri Lanka tourism, Sri Lanka is probably one of the most beautiful islands, and they say that we have a 5-star island with, kind of 3-star hotels. So there is an opportunity now for us to complement, the God-given island that we have with all the modern services, the modern facilities, the food maybe on the internet, on the connectivity, the digital side of it. In every aspect, there is this opportunity for us to go global. So I think, and eventually, I mean, of course, many of, John Keells and Ed Kinspens have already done it outside of Sri Lanka, but many others also have the opportunity now to invest in the leisure sector in other countries as well.
Thank you, Hiran. Suresh, please.
So a 5-star island, 3-star hotels, and a 7-star beer. You can't go wrong with the last one.
What time are we having?
So Sri Lanka, at the end of the day, very small country, 20 million population or a little more, maybe 21 now. So it's not possible for Sri Lanka as a country to grow our economy and sustain it trading amongst ourselves. So as a country, it's absolutely essential that we need to look overseas. We need to build markets overseas. That's number one. Number two, also as a country, we need to attract investment into Sri Lanka. We need to look at technology that comes into Sri Lanka. So the second point is that FDI is a critical component of the Sri Lankan economic story going forward. Now, for you guys, people who are Sri Lankans living overseas wanting to come back, so here's the opportunity. You've got the skills, you've got the talent, you've got the experience in working in way more competitive markets than we are used to in this country. So when you look at it from the perspective of Sri Lanka as a country which needs to go out, whether it's from our products or services or whether we need to attract that investment from outside, you guys got the experience, the expertise to help Sri Lanka get to that point. So the point here is, I think you have the opportunities to come back, to contribute to Sri Lanka. And if you look at it from an opportunity perspective, and ask which sectors, let me, rather than just say the sectors themselves, let me very broadly paint a big picture opportunity here. We lie just 22 kilometers south of the second largest economy in the world, or potentially the second largest economy in the world, which is India. We have, like Hiran was saying, we have a fantastic product when it comes to tourism. We have an extremely fertile soil in this country. Okay, you plant anything and it grows. We have an ocean that surrounds us, which is much bigger. Our ocean boundary, our maritime boundary is much bigger than our land mass. So here are some of the opportunities, the sectors that have the potential to grow and to contribute into the Sri Lankan economy. So the opportunity, I think, for the country is huge.
Thank you, Suresh. Arjuna?
Thanks, Peter. So from my perspective, really, I look at it from a perspective of how we can attract the best talent back to Sri Lanka, and that's what I believe the crux of the matter is. I myself am a returnee. I returned to Sri Lanka almost 20 years ago after finishing or spending 23 years. So I guess you know my age right now. But basically, you know, I've basically came back to Sri Lanka with the hope to give something back to Sri Lanka, and in the last 20 years, I've spent time building organizations that have attracted people not only from Sri Lanka but from all over the world to come back here and work again in the world. And really, my thought process is, how do we get talent, continue to bring the talent that's out there in the world? Whenever I go out to the US or to any part of the world, I see so much talent at different stages of growth. And I think about the fact that I came back to Sri Lanka and how we can attract those of you who want to come back. And it's, you know, it's not been easy in 20 years, but I am proof of the fact that you can flourish in this market. There's an opportunity to use Sri Lanka as a sort of the springboard and become global. And that's something that, you know, I truly believe that we can do. I mean, my focus is IT, but without great people, I can't actually drive and build and actually raise the global bar that Sri Lanka has. I mean, I look at the Silicon Valley, Silicon Alley, and basically, you know, what is different in Sri Lanka? We've got great young people, but we also need these middle-level managers, senior managers who've had exposure to those markets, who know how to operate in those markets, who can drive business in those markets. So that's really, really something I'm continuing to look for. I have people who've come back from Canada, from Australia, different parts of the world who are working for me already. But one of the things I've seen is they've actually had the opportunity. Sometimes there are a lot of people stuck in middle management in other countries who are small fish in a larger pond. And really the aspect of them coming back here has been that they can see faster career growth if they're obviously good at what they do and they have the right values, the right sort of drive. So we've been able to catapult some of these personalities who come back into the senior leadership positions. So that's got to be very attractive for those of you who are living out in those countries. So that's kind of my spin on how I would try and raise the global bar in terms of actually getting all of you to come back to Sri Lanka, or those of you who are not in Sri Lanka, and help us drive this country and this whole belief in the fact that we can be world beaters forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Like Arjuna, I myself am a returnee and I came 16 years ago. And the topic is raising the bar, and I'm going to take a slightly different tack from the other speakers and talk about some of the challenges I faced in coming back to Sri Lanka. In We know that in raising the bar, the most important thing is the people talent. When I was chatting to Arjuna in the break, he told me about the high quality of some of the tech people that he is able to recruit, and he's grooming and nurturing them to areas of excellence. But I actually see shortcomings in our schooling system, and this was made very obvious to me because I came back. I had one daughter who had been partially educated in the UK, and two other children who grew up here, and I put them in the local education system. And I know this is going to make me unpopular. People like to sing the praises of Sri Lanka, Sri Lankan education, etc. But I was disappointed to find that there is a lot of book knowledge. They weren't taught to think independently. And I think that is so important in the adults they become. They were taught to, for example, study a history book and regurgitate facts. They weren't taught to think about why the history had happened. This was made more obvious to me when I decided to move my youngest daughter to an international school which followed the UK curriculum, and she really struggled. She really struggled because now she had to think about things for herself and ask herself why something had happened in the past and not just remember that it has happened. Why am I bringing this up in this forum? Because these are the people who end up working. These are the people who come into the corporate world, which all of us operate in. I find that we have some outstanding individuals, but raising the bar is actually about raising the average. It isn't about having a few stars. It's about everyone performing at their potential. And I do feel that what we have on offer today lets down our people in bringing them to the best they can be. So in the corporate environment, I worked in the UK for many years. The biggest difference I noticed that people were more passive. They weren't so willing to make decisions. They waited to be told what to do rather than thinking what for themselves. Now again, this is a broad generalization and isn't an indictment of our working force in general. But just speaking broadly, these are the things that we need to change if we are going to be a world leader and we're going to compete globally. Our universities are able to absorb only a small percentage of people who are looking for university education. Unfortunately, what this means is that people like you go out to educate yourselves, find that you have a job outside of Sri Lanka, you have a comfortable lifestyle, and unless there is a pull for family reasons, you may perhaps think of staying out. So again, our university lets us down by not providing sufficient places for the people here. So they are compelled to go abroad or seek alternative ways to educate themselves. Another thing that is close to my heart is the fact that we don't have liberal immigration policies. Now, I know that we have introduced dual nationality, but that just isn't enough. I mean, Sri Lankan citizens who go abroad sometimes have spouses who aren't nationals, and this is a problem I face myself, or rather my spouse. When you come back, you don't have the same rights to work here as you do in the West, really. This is a big disadvantage because I know of people who have left Sri Lanka simply because their spouse cannot be employed in a meaningful fashion. So that's kind of the bad news, but what's the good news? We've ended a war. This is a phase in which we are developing, and there is a lot of opportunity if you're an entrepreneur. Things that have already been done in the West haven't yet been done here. And you see evidence of that in the many companies, in the tech field. Everywhere there are opportunities that people come in from abroad. They have, I mean, you have skills that you have picked up abroad, and perhaps it's already been done there. But here it hasn't been done. This is still unexplored territory, and there are more opportunities here if you're of an entrepreneurial bent than perhaps outside. So to summarize, I've talked to you about the challenges, but I also see Sri Lanka as an area of a country where there is growth and an opportunity for you to be part of that success story and make a difference.
Thank you, Manjula. Ajit?
Everything has been said, right?
Well, you'll find something.
Will I? Okay. Well, we are world class already in one thing, and that is screwing up the economy and politics. So in that sense, I think we've really raised the bar. But what and that will continue. That's not going to stop. You shouldn't worry about that. That's par for the course. This is Sri Lanka. It's a subcontinent. Take it as a given. But what that does is gives you huge opportunity. Policymakers will consistently screw up. They will play politics. But what it does to all of us, and what it's done in my experience over now almost 35 years in the private sector, it's allowed us significant opportunity. And we've looked at this in terms of what are we seeing here? Is it a negative, all of this, what goes on in countries like this? My entire career essentially was, and I started work, it was 1982. 1983, the war began, so my whole career was during a conflict, essentially. And we've grown an organization. I've seen this organization grow from literally nothing to what it is today. And it is because we saw the gaps in the market as a result of the inefficient environment that we worked in. Now that is the opportunity, the inefficiency that it creates. We spoke about education, fantastic opportunity. There's huge demand for the right education. These are areas that, in fact, the private sector can play. You don't have to wait for policy direction. You jump in, look at it positively. It's not a half-empty glass, it's a half-full glass. Take the glass and finish it off. And that's the way I would look at it. Then that's what I want to say in terms of how you should view Sri Lanka. We can sit here and talk about a million negatives, and there are a million. But see the opportunity, and these opportunities are what we should bite.
Thank you very much, Ajit. And just to jump straight into it, I mean, I do appreciate that you're trying very hard, or your purpose is to try and make everyone feel that this is a wonderful place to come to and all of that. But I think we shouldn't take too much for granted the intelligence of the audience here, and they definitely would like to, deal with some of the challenges we face. My first question is to you, Hiran. Now, Saman Kelegama made a talk some time ago, I can't remember exactly when, but a very critical analysis of the tourism industry in Sri Lanka. And we'll come to some of the numbers. The point he makes is that one thing he talks about the lack of data. And this is a big problem we see between developed countries and global companies and Sri Lanka. We are happy to bat on with notions that are expressed widely. For example, we say we have a high literacy rate. And then there's Manjula saying that means nothing, which doesn't produce creative thinking. Now he says, we talk about Sri Lanka, the slogan, Wonder of Asia. And he says, in fact, he can think of only two, Sigiriya and the Mineria elephants. Now, has he got it wrong? Or are we kidding ourselves? Is this truly a wonder of Asia?
I hope someone is not here.
Go have a go at him.
No. I mean, it's his way. I mean, each man or woman is entitled to his or her opinion. Well, I think I totally agree with Ajit that there is tremendous opportunity here. I mean, yes, it's chaotic. I mean, you look at the traffic now. I mean, I'm just sitting here and thinking, how am I going to get home? Because I had to take my wife out to dinner, and I live in Rajagiri.
There is an app called Pick Me.
Pick Me. I thought you were working for John Keells, not for Pick Me Up. I know. So, there are issues, but I think the good news is there is opportunity. The opportunity is, I mean, okay, somebody created Sigiriya, right? I mean, okay, Mineria also partly created because the Mineria tank was built by a king in Sri Lanka one time, and now the elephants gather there, and so on, so it becomes an attraction. Sigiriya became an attraction because Kasyapa went and built a castle there after killing his father. So therefore there is a story to tell. But there are many more stories to tell. There are many more stories to tell, many more experiences to create. I think today people travel to experience things. And I agree with you also. Data in tourism, data is always questionable. I mean, no country in the world has got it right.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Hiran, just so that we keep,
Sure.
you know, the point he's making is, for example, this thing about 2.5 million tourists by 2016,
Right.
and we are measuring against this. And the whole thing about global is to set a standard, measure against it, not just keep repeating these mantras, you know, like politicians do. So he's saying that the numbers look fairly, you know, a little questionable because the way we are counting. So we are not really questioning, you know, benchmarks.
No.
Okay.
The numbers are correct because
Okay.
anyone who stays here for 24 hours, now if some of you have traveled with a foreign passport, you guys are counted as tourists here.
So what he's saying is that that doesn't count.
No, globally, UNWTO, according to the tourism statistics, anyone who crosses a border with a foreign passport and stays in that particular country for more than 24 hours is counted as a tourist. So you might travel visiting friends, relations, on work for a day, but if you stay for 24 hours in a country, that's a tourist. So someone as an economist might have other views, but that's the way the numbers are calculated. So, you know, you can argue about the numbers, but that's not the point. I mean, the point is there is opportunity created, and then you have to take it and go with it.
Okay, we'll come to that later. Ajit, to you. I mean, one of the things that would distinguish a global company is innovation. I mean, I do appreciate that John Keells is a very large group. You know, your market cap is 1.75 billion. I'm not too sure whether a young person coming into the employment market necessarily sees John Keells as the very epitome of innovation. In fact, you may be seen as a rather old-fashioned company. So I'm saying, what is the innovation that a company like you are, you know?
Well, actually, I've got two scientists sitting over there.
Lovely.
Right at the end there, who have come from overseas and working with us. Maybe they can, at the next break or whatever, talk about innovation at John Keells. You're right. From a brand perspective, a 145-year-old company does look old and seems old from outside. I'm not going to deny that. That's certainly the case. It's really what happens inside and how the DNA, what's going on within the organization. It's always a challenge, the old economy moving into the new economy and being relevant, and that's a constant process of change. And that's ongoing. I mean, we have to I mean, that I think is the same for all of us. I'm not necessarily talking from a John Keells perspective. It's the global reality, right? To be relevant, to be competitive, and when we're talking competitive, it's not being competitive within the small pond anymore because the barriers have broken. We are now open to foreign competition and so on in all our businesses. You have to be able to compete with the technology, with the efficiency, with the productivity of all of them. If we don't survive. And I think the proof is really going to be and is how we perform, our actual financial performance, our investor profiles and so on. And I think all of us are in organizations that compete with multinationals. And I think we compete extremely well.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Arjuna, your industry, the apparel industry. Now, I've been reading stuff about the fact that this whole industry, which is the second largest earner for foreign exchange contributor to GDP, I think it's now about $4.5 billion, maybe a little more. Now, isn't it essentially, aren't we in a very low value add business? And we speak so proudly about this. I mean, we have a lot of things going, for sure, but we hardly have any brands worth talking about. And we seem to be quite happy to be in this space, low value add, labor intensive business. And in a situation where a country like Bangladesh, playing the same game, has now gone to 20 billion. They started long after us. What do you think about the lack of innovation in your industry?
First of all, I think I'd like to say that I think Sri Lanka is no longer in the low value add space. We've actually differentiated in the types of garments that we're producing, in the complexity of the garments that we're producing. So, and unlike Bangladesh and China, for example, the quantum of labor that's available is just phenomenally higher. So we have a situation where we've had to differentiate and innovate in terms of the types of, the way that we structure our processes, the way that we actually utilize technology in the space. I can talk in terms of Brandix from that perspective. Having had exposure to one of the other large manufacturers too, I see those same trends continuing out there. And technology innovation is really forming the forefront of how we're taking things forward, rather than focusing on trying to beat the unit labor cost.
Okay.
And that's not how we're going to be able to
I
survive.
do appreciate that you do innovation in the process, supply chain, for example.
Yeah.
They want stuff delivered to the shop. But in terms of product innovation, we do not own a single brand.
Sure.
In that sense, we are still labor-intensive manufacturing. You can spin it whichever way you like.
Yeah.
But now, for example, your competitor, they are saying that we want 60% of our revenue to come from value add. I mean, that seems like a big dream. Where is this change going to come? From essentially labor-intensive, low-value manufacturing to brands, innovation,
I think if you look at the evolution of the industry, I mean, basically we've had production happening basically near shore and then coming back offshore, and we've had a situation where we've seen the traditional manufacturers basically focus on manufacturing. Now, what I'm seeing globally from a manufacturing perspective is more and more manufacturers are starting to go up the supply chain. They're starting to get to acquire brands, and that's a trend that's happening here in Sri Lanka, but also globally. So I think from a Sri Lankan perspective, what I'd like to say, and on Brandix's behalf, is we're focusing on our core competencies. We're innovating, which is being great on manufacturing and the supply chain.
Okay.
Right? So I think there is huge opportunity if we have individuals coming back who've been in the fashion industry, who are able to take things forward. I mean, I have a colleague of mine, a former colleague, who came back from a high fashion retailer in the UK and basically came into a technology slot in one of our competitors. So if you've got people like that coming in, you're going to see opportunities not only in technology innovation, but also in product innovation if we can attract people.
Okay. Thank you. Suresh, we know that disruption can come. I mean, as much as we are all comfortable that we are parts of large conglomerates, groups, I don't want to even talk about the examples of disruption to business, and we know that. Pick me, for example, or whatever. Now, when you were at the chamber, or even otherwise, where do you think, did you all have any discussion about what is the biggest disruption that could happen to some of our key companies or industries from outside or from completely new, disruptors? Would you have any thoughts about what are the most likely of, say, even your business, for example? Where do you think that disruption will come, and do you worry about it? And Ajit, I would like you also to, share some thoughts on that, because you are the large, well-established companies. Go ahead, Suresh.
Peter, fundamentally, the Sri Lankan companies, I mean, with very, very few exceptions, we are generally all pretty small, I mean, even from a regional perspective. So I think the focus is not worry too much about where the disruption can come from, but instead focus on the growth opportunities that are available. So any Sri Lankan company, I think the focus should be on where are the growth opportunities, what are those growth opportunities, and let's try and find them. The disruptions, I think, will come, and I think it's part and parcel of any business environment. I mean, Ajit said he started work in 1982, and then his entire life has been during the course of a war, which was an enormous disruption in any case. I mean, Hiran's business, I think all our businesses. But the fact is that we overcame those disruptions, which were across economy. Okay, and not only have we survived a disruption of that nature, but we've also grown during this period. I think every one of our companies have grown tremendously, notwithstanding a disruption which is, in a sense, unimaginable. And even if you take it from a country perspective, there have been many instances where people came into Sri Lanka the first time and said, I can't believe this country is going through a war during the time of the war, right? So
My question was more about technology
Yeah.
led disruption.
Yeah,
I mean,
Peter,
not economic and political.
Sure, I mean, like,
Go ahead, please.
like I said, the disruptions can and will come. I think it's part and parcel of business. I don't think yeah, of course, you know, you look at what risks are for the business and you try to mitigate them. But I think the real focus from a Sri Lankan perspective, our companies are relatively small. I think the opportunities far outweigh the risks that we have. And again, from an audience that's working overseas, wanting to come back, the kind of skills and the experience that they have, tremendously valuable. Because I think Manjula spoke of this earlier. You know, the Sri Lankan culture is one where you don't generally challenge the status quo. But businesses in Sri Lanka, because we are looking at this whole opportunity out there, we need to challenge the status quo. And we need people who will come into our businesses and look at what we are doing now and say, look guys, this is not what we should be doing, we need to be doing something else.
Okay, so on that, Ajit, I'll come to you a little later because I thought I'll go straight to Manjula. Manjula, now, you spoke about schools, and we know this, that schools in fact kill creativity. And there was a survey done by IBM of 4,000 CEOs, and they said, as you face the uncertainty of the future, what is the one thing that bothers you? And they said lack of people with creative thinking. It was not technology, it was not, you know, markets or anything like that. Now, you spoke about this. Do Sri Lankan companies, by and large, I know this is a generalization, allow this kind of open, challenging the hierarchy environment? My own, yeah, go ahead.
I can't speak for all companies because my experience is limited to the ones I've worked in. But personally, I have found it difficult to encourage people to actually speak out because there are some cultural inhibitors. There's a culture where you respect your boss, you feel you shouldn't challenge them enough. You shouldn't challenge them. So there is often an acceptance of the authority that comes from above. And I think that is necessarily limiting. You don't really get the best opinions if you aren't in an environment where you can challenge, rethink, and refocus. I'm not saying this is the same elsewhere, and I believe some of the organizations here may have successfully broken down those barriers. But this is something that was very noticeable to me, that the culture of respect, that people feel if the boss says something, they should do it rather than accept it. If I can just say one thing, picking up on the question, what Suresh, you asking Suresh about disruptors. I think the disruptors that we will have here have already happened elsewhere. So if companies look out at what's happening in the West, PickMe is a good example. That's happened elsewhere. So if you're in a business where you see the travel industry, if you look at Find My Fare, they're bringing online ticketing in and challenging travel agents. So if you look at what are the disruptions that are going to come to any of our businesses, we only need to look to the West because they're already being disrupted. And we can, since we are lagging behind in terms of what's happening here, if we look there, we can actually see what are going to be the disruptors to each of our businesses. And technology is where it's all coming from.
Okay, talking of technology, Ajit, to you, digitalization, because a lot of the companies, the global companies, differentiate themselves because two things. One, they use data. They are data-driven. So there's a good idea about what their customers want, what they're buying, what they're experiencing. Don't you think we lag behind in Sri Lanka? For example, if I were to, I'll just put that to Ajit and then come back to you, Manjula. You can jump in and answer that. Take, for example, Keells, the shopping experience, your Nexus card. I mean, today you have to go there, and every time you go there, you have to, that fellow asks you, telephone number hai mukadda? And the last time there was a lady next to me, she gave her number. I was tempted to take it down. Rather loudly,
Which Keells is that?
So I was just stuffing my stuff, helping your girls to, you know. And then I think that's a private information that need not be shouted out. I mean, do you think that we can do a lot better?
Yeah, without a doubt, we can do a lot better. I mean, this is just we've gone from a plastic card to the phone number. I mean, that's the most
progress.
That's progress in itself. Yeah. But certainly there's a lot more to be done, but it's happening. Because if it doesn't happen, as I said earlier, it doesn't happen and if we don't move in that direction and start sort of operating at a global level, we will perish, that's for sure. So yes, and what you will see is, I mean, you took the Keells super example and the Nexus platform. I mean, what you will see is possibly something a little bit more sophisticated coming through very soon. And to the extent that we will use the data, because the data that we have is on each customer is quite extensive.
Yep.
And we can now start, we are bringing in the predictive software, which can predict your behavior, what you want, when you want it. You will be getting direct marketing, individuals will get direct messages on items that you want as opposed to the general sort of stuff and all of that thing, which is anyway happening overseas. So the point that was made earlier by Manjula is...
My only question was, are we too slow in adopting these technologies? These have been around for a while, you know, I mean, you know, there's a lot of money.
It's this, right?
Are you investing in this?
No, you have to look at it this way. Slow to an extent when you do a comparison overseas. You must look at our internet penetration. We've gone from 0 to 20% penetration of smartphones only in the last 3 years, 3 to 4 years. Otherwise, it was 0. It was about 1.1%. So now you're going to see the pace changing. I mean, this whole thing about disruption also, Peter, I mean, you know, it's sort of rather a hacked sort of phrase. I mean, everybody has been disrupted forever. I mean, from Thomas Edison was a disruptor. Alexander Graham Bell was a disruptor. In 1982, when I started work, we had typewriters and a telex machine, one telex machine. Then the fax machine came and disrupted everybody. The email disrupted the world. So disruption will go on. It's just the pace of disruption has increased. And therefore, the pace of innovation, the pace of change will increase. And I think we are there again, another opportunity for those outside who have the exposure to come in here and join the party. I mean, I think it is the opportunity.
Arjuna, Arjuna, I want to talk about one of the things that global companies try to do is they try to create enormous differentiation, not incremental. And I think a lot of Sri Lankan companies are very good at being content with incremental, you know, differentiation vis-a-vis their competition. And if you are to create extraordinary value, you have to be that breakthrough company that can create massive differentiation. Can you give us an example of the work that you are doing that is focusing on, I am trying to do some work here that will bring significant differentiation to either Brandix or to the customers you're working with?
Sure. I'll just spend a minute on what Ajit was talking about. I think in terms of the platforms, for example, what's also we're seeing is that, say 20 years ago, there were no ERPs, there were no proper systems, technologies across all the companies, but we're seeing common platforms, you know, represented by the top 3 ERP companies in the world, or enterprise software companies in the world, and every single large organization in Sri Lanka has an ERP. They've put on different types of technology on top of it. They're using e-commerce. So there is an advent of technology, and I have to say that I don't see a huge difference, and for those of you coming back, you'll be working with familiar platforms. So that's really from a technology perspective.
But isn't that rather old world, Arjuna?
It
ERP,
is,
for example, my CEO at Tehema's, Hussein, when I talked to him about analytics, he said, what are you all really trying to do? And I said, you know what, you use a large, I don't want to mention the names, you use a very large company that provides your ERP. And I said, for my business, I see no use from it at all. And he said, neither do I.
So that's not strictly true.
Are old world out there. They are not going to give you any information, Ajit, for example, the money that you have spent on ERP. For you to run your decision on a day-to-day basis, we do not have that.
You need your source data, Peter, and you need your source data, and basically leveraging that source data, you can run analytics, the various platforms on that. So I think once you have the right base, and whether it's ERP or whatever legacy systems you have, you now have the opportunity to actually extract information and do what you need from that perspective. So I think that we could probably, jab at each other for a while about that aspect of things. But coming back to what you were talking about. Differentiation. So one of the things that we've strived to do as a business, my business is only it's 3 years old, but in 3 years, basically, I've kind of disrupted the norm. I built relationships with, billion-dollar companies. I've basically worked with Mayo Clinic in actually commercializing their internal software and taking that out to the market, to the healthcare system, in the healthcare systems in the US. I've also, and this is one of the key things, we're working with a large company that focuses on telehealth in the US. And what we've done is we've actually helped them commercialize that software by virtue of the fact that we were great technology people. And we've got into that niche, we understand that industry now, and we've done that in the space of a couple of years. But what we've done is we've presented ourselves as people who can deliver technology projects. And we're now, right now in this space where we're on the verge of working with some very large foreign and international bodies in terms of providing telehealth systems to them in different parts of the world. So there's a lot happening, and from my perspective, what we've done, everyone looks at it and says, really? In 2 years you've built relationships. I have an innovation center at Mayo Clinic. But it's about actually going out there and differentiating. And our differentiating factor is that I have great technology people. I have people who can take an idea and convert it into something tangible that's usable by a customer. And we've done that here in Sri Lanka with, I know sometimes mediocre people, but we've helped nurture those people. We've helped grow them. So what the universities couldn't do, what the schools couldn't do, I've actually spent a lot of time with my HR team in improving their language skills, in making sure they can perform in the global environment. So we've done a lot of the soft skills training as well as nurturing the technology. So that's how we really differentiate.
Yeah, thanks. Hiran, to you. I'll come back to you, Suresh, because Hiran has been silent for a while. Hiran, you also, apart from the work that you're doing with your own group, the Jetwing group, you also are the chairman of the Tourism Association, or what do they call it?
Tourist Hotels Association.
Tourist Hotels Association, okay. So you are representing the industry. Yeah. Now, obviously, you're an industry that's also facing a number of challenges. You're talking about 2.5 million tourists. You're talking about rooms. They say you need 50,000 rooms. Some argue that you are falling short of it. Is there a proper branding? You said small miracle. Someone forced you to say wonder of Asia because that sounded nice to go with their whole image and all of that. Yeah. So tell us, what is it that is really bothering you? As you drive this Hoteliers Association, what are the 2 or 3 things that you think that's challenging so that someone out here might be of help?
Well, still there is lack of confidence as a hoteliers, because we had 26 years of war and we were struggling. So therefore, now they got into a shell, and basically they were on survival mode for so many years, and now it's just coming out of it. So it's slowly but surely the confidence is returning. People are now thinking of investing big money, and also for some who have come in new to the industry, who are from other sectors, are getting themselves burned as well. Tourism, hoteliering is not. It's not rocket science, but it requires a lot of capital. It's capital intensive, right? And return on investments are not fabulous either. So you have to really work hard. You have to market the, hotels, of course, the destination first. And now another disruptor is the informal sector.
Yes.
In our country alone, we think now at least 1/3 of the accommodation provided are those who are not registered with the tourist board.
So on that subject, what about Airbnb? How much are you worried about them? And we're talking about disruption.
Well, we are concerned. We are worried. Because these are the people who are not registered. They don't pay the taxes. They are not regulated. So if something goes wrong, then they will say, I went to Sri Lanka and I was cheated, I was robbed or whatever. So there is no way to trace them. So these are issues that worry us, and also sometimes it's unfair playing field, because we would pay all our taxes. Whatever you pay in a hotel, 27.5% goes as taxes and service charges. So whatever the company gets is 72.5. So whereas somebody else can take the entire 100% and pocket it. And that's
so how do you think you What are some thoughts that you think, some ideas that you have that you might be able to overcome this problem?
Well, it's difficult. I mean, it involves, politicians who will have the courage to regulate them. Because
Those very same fellows that Ajit just spoke very disparagingly about?
No, I think Hiran's getting into politics.
Well, I mean, because these guys control a lot of votes. So they don't want to go and upset them, go and regulate them. If you do, the chance of losing votes are there. I mean, we as a company, I have one vote. But we don't tell anybody who works with us to whom to vote for. It's their decision. But some of them, they can get into groups and there's a block vote there. So a lot of politicians don't want to mess with them.
Okay, one quick question before because we have 16 minutes,
Yep.
and then we must have some questions from the audience. They must be waiting with their questions. Quick question. Now, tourism contribution to GDP, 5% in Singapore, 7.5% in Vietnam, 12% in Malaysia.
Yeah, we are not there yet.
We are 2%.
Yeah.
What's ailing our tourism industry?
Well, now, as I said, it's coming up.
Okay.
Earlier it was 1.2 or something, and now it's 2.7 if I'm not mistaken. So getting close to
2.5,
3.
yeah. Okay.
It's a matter of getting more, obviously more revenue. Opening up new areas, the north and the east, promoting those areas, finding ways for people to get there as well. So these are some of the challenges that we face.
Right. Questions from the audience, please. We have 15 minutes. Yes. What's the form? Do they give their name and ask the question? Does it? Is that how it works? Yeah, your name and keep your questions short, please, and folks from the panel, try to keep your answers brief as well, so that we can have more questions. Thank you.
I am Sarat Vijay Singh, former ambassador to Israel and UAE. I have few questions and concerns, especially for Manjula. Manjula said that the immigration control in Sri Lanka is stringent. I respectfully disagree with it. You said the immigration control in Sri Lanka is strict. I disagree respectfully with it because you see in the other countries in the West or even in Pakistan or India, it is really, really strict. I am an immigration lawyer in London. I really fight hard. But as an ambassador, I was very liberal in issuing visas from Israel and from UAE to Sri Lanka. So I don't think it is the case. We are very liberal, point one. And I have from Hiran, I have a concern on in tourism. Now there are tourists who come here who will eat paratha, drink plenty. Eat paratha.
Paratha, okay.
Drink plenty, and then they bargain for a glass of water, 50 rupees or 50 rupees, sleep in temples, and be in the villages spoiling our youngsters. Now, don't you think that we must have some control over them? They must have a minimum amount that they should bring here, or something like that. And from the moderator, I am challenging you for a public debate that my proposition is that Sri Lanka is the best destination because nowhere in the world you get this in a compact
I'm sorry,
area.
I'm only a moderator. My job is to ask questions. So my job is to provoke. So we'll take the question. Okay. Yeah, we'll take the question. Thank you.
If there are people who come and molest or abuse our young children, certainly they should not be allowed in here and put behind bars or whatever. But I'm not aware of people who eat paratha and plenty and sleep in temples. If there are, I don't know how many of them come. I'm sorry.
But what about all our elderly ladies who go to Bodh and they also go and stay in temples and drink plenty and eat paratha.
Peter,
So,
can I
I thought it would be disparaging about them. Go ahead, please.
No, we can't be discriminating in terms of our guests. Anybody is a guest. And it's up to the guest to decide what experience he wants. We should be able to cater to it all. That particular guest that you're talking about, if he doesn't come here, he'll go somewhere else. But everybody adds, every tourist adds to your GDP, right? Every time somebody comes in, there is an addition to GDP. There is a massive multiplier effect. I mean, let's take an example of what we missed out on. I mean, I think really the point I think Hiran was making earlier when the question was put to him, we're talking about 1.8 million tourists right now. I mean, it's nothing. We are really not a destination yet. If you go back 30 years, into the late 70s, early 80s, places like Malaysia were similar to us in the numbers. We were getting about 500,000 tourists. Today, Malaysia gets 30 million tourists.
Exactly.
30 million. We are still at 1.8. So, the issue here is we are talking about a population of 20 million. We are investing heavily in economic assets like roads and highways and so on. The utilization of that to make maximum return requires tourism and not a small number. It requires large numbers. I agree there is an issue here. We must make sure we have stringent regulation to manage development and certain aspects of discipline so that it's not a complete free-for-all. But within that framework, to get the maximum benefit for the investments that the government has to make in the superstructure of this country for the benefit of its people, tourism certainly in its numbers is required.
Thank you, Ajit. Manjula, do you want to comment because a comment was made?
No,
Or you want to pass?
I didn't want to comment because
Yeah.
there wasn't a question, it was
Okay,
a statement.
right, lovely. Questions, please. Yes, the gentleman over there.
Right. This is a question to the gentleman from Brandix.
Arjuna.
Correct. Right. I mean, I work within a tech field myself, and one of the problems I see in Sri Lanka is the lack of quality, and especially if you're competing in the global market. For the price that you pay for what you get in Sri Lanka, it doesn't really match up, and one of the biggest problems is the qualitative aspect. I mean, how do you guys address that problem, and what do you do differently?
Well, from a quality perspective, I presume you're talking about the quality of the software that we produce. That's it, right? Yeah. So, I mean, we've gone through the same problems that each of the technology companies probably represented in this room do. We follow the same methods, but what we try and do is we try and inculcate ownership as much as possible into the. So we're trying to create some sort of team-based incentives, even in the software industry, where basically based on the revenue you're trying to acquire from a customer, you actually get to take back part of that revenue as a team. So when you're working in that, and that's a cross-functional team that goes across Sri Lanka and, say, in this case, the US, where we've got the front end in the US that's basically, managing the customer, and then the back end here in Sri Lanka. So we've got that sort of cross-functional international team that's working together and incentivized together as well. So that has helped us.
So basically, you have the quality-focused team based overseas who would oversee the work in Sri Lanka. Is that how it works?
Well, we have the quality function here in Sri Lanka, but what we do is we have additional quality checks on site as well.
Right. Okay. Right. Thanks.
Actually, this question is macro-based one, and especially our economy. It is right now our major foreign exchange generators, like these housemaids, and then the garment industry, and the estate, like tea estate. So this is like only females are involved in these three major income generations, right? So then where is our male? So where's the contribution to the GDP? I have not seen anybody raise this issue as an economist or whatever, and this is a serious problem because most of our young, energetic guys are in tri-shows, or more than 1.2 million guys are in the tri-shows. What they are doing really? They are not adding anything to the GDP, from my aspect. Then the second one is most of the people are earlier they were in the war, like security personnel. Now they have just either in the security or they are just doing the private securities, right? So they're just security something. They are not producing anything. So this is another problem, that though we have some like high maybe GDP or the per capita, but the contributors to that, only these females, and their life standards are very low. And so this is a serious problem. And so we, from our education system or our structure, so we have not done the structure in order to absorb this young crowd, energetic crowd. They just do something like this very informal things. So I just want to maybe any of the, especially the person from the John Keells and maybe Brandix, and you can just think of this issue, because I don't think that a politician can think these issues.
Suresh.
So you have to have a very good vision to sort out this problem.
Thank you.
Otherwise, it's a shame for a male. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Suresh, maybe you'll have a go at
So
that.
fundamentally what you're saying is you absorb the young males. The females from what you're saying are nicely employed. So you absorb the young males into more productive work is what you're saying, fundamentally, okay? So yeah, absolutely right. Which is why, Sri Lanka, small country, which is what I started by saying. Sri Lanka, small country, small market. Not possible to absorb all these people into productive work unless we look overseas, right? So we got to find these markets outside. Companies like mine, companies like Hiran, all our companies. We all need to go out. Yes, we haven't gone out to the extent that we should, but we need to do that. And I don't think Sri Lanka has any other way forward. I think we've got to do that going forward. To also get that employment, we also need to attract FDI into Sri Lanka. So these are the two fundamental things that the country needs to focus on from a broader economic perspective. And here again, I go back to this whole thing about the opportunity for the people who live, the Sri Lankans who live overseas. This is really the opportunity that you have to come back in here, because our economy needs to be outward facing rather than inward facing. And you guys who have worked overseas, who've got the experience overseas, are in the best position to help the country do that, right? And there was this whole thing going around whether Sri Lanka is sort of modernized, not modernized, are we using the right technologies, no, etc., etc. Bottom line is that Sri Lanka is not the world's richest country, okay? So naturally, there are things where we need to catch up. And here again is the real opportunity for all those of you who live overseas, who have the experience in those new technologies, to bring those technologies back into Sri Lanka, not necessarily in the form of an investment, but simply your ideas.
Suresh, just to quickly butt in on that. Yes, you are saying that, but for example, Facebook, their 5 values are move fast, break things, be bold, be open. Do Sri Lankan company honestly, and you have sat in the chamber and you have seen large numbers of, do they really allow their people to be open, to be bold, to move fast and break things? Or does the manager break his head if he makes the first mistake and you chose him a show cause letter?
No, Peter, I think it's changing quite significantly. I think with the younger set of managers coming up the ranks, I think the outlook is very different. And fundamentally, if you take the company that I work in, our motto is we hire you not for following instructions, but we hire you to use your head. So I think it's changing, Peter. And guys, at the end of the day, I think every country has gone through issues. Just go back. I mean, China today, we say China, yeah, sure, modern economy, etc., etc. But go back to the time when Deng Xiaoping took the country over. At that time, China was a mess. Okay, I mean, you look at Burma today. Burma, sure, it's going in a direction and probably in the right direction, but Burma is fundamentally a mess. You look at almost any Asian country. Look at India. You think India is easy to do business in? No. It's an absolutely tough place to do business in. So every country's got its problems. And the thing with Sri Lanka is because we are a small country, we can manage our problems much more effectively and efficiently than most of these other countries can, right? And I think Sri Lanka also being a small country is a huge advantage because we are no threat to anyone. So for any country to work with Sri Lanka is not a problem, right? And this is the opportunity that Sri Lanka has. That we can, for example, have trade agreements with these other countries because we are no threat to them. And therein lies the opportunity. And for you guys, the opportunity is because you have the experience, you have the skills that maybe some Sri Lankans don't have. So that's the opportunity for you.
Thank you, Suresh. Questions?
Yes, I have a question on the side. This is from Mr. Hiran Cooray. So one thing I've realized is when you speak about hospitality and tourism, almost everyone visiting any country is looking at an experience in the sense that they want something unforgettable. And that is directly connected to the standard of service which I feel is a huge problem we have in Sri Lanka. And with the inflow of so many people who are experienced in this particular area of the service industry or hospitality, what would you say is the best way to tackle this problem? Because it is a mission critical issue in the sense for hospitality.
Well, I think I don't think it's so critical because now we are attracting more youth into tourism. There was a time that nobody wanted to join tourism industry. Until 2009, it was very difficult. Not anymore. Now more youth are joining the industry. The challenge is to hire the right person, because there are, I mean, most Sri Lankans are naturally warm, right? So we have to find those people to join the industry. There are some who don't want to wake up in the morning and smile, and they should not join tourism. They should, they should do something else. Join a factory, whatever, where they
Join a factory, okay.
They don't come into contact with another humans, So people who are warm, friendly, cheerful are the ones who should join tourism. And you can make a mistake while serving somebody, but with a genuine smile and an apology, you can overcome that. I mean, people are bound to make mistakes. Nobody is perfect, but it's a way how you handle it. And a lot of people will accept a genuine sorry and a sympathetic smile can get away with it. That's
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I've just got one question because I missed out on this, and I think it will be of some interest to the audience. Compensation. Because yesterday I was talking to a friend from Facebook, and he said that at Facebook they have three things: openness, ownership, and feedback. And he said on the context of ownership, he said if we tell managers to take ownership for the work they are doing to ensure the vision of the company is fulfilled, they must join the party by saying we have ownership of the company. So he told me that Facebook tries to keep the salary level at the 75th percentile of similar companies, whereas the stock option at the 99th percentile. Manjula, I can ask this to you because you have not spoken a lot at the session. And you declined the invitation to a little exchange very deftly.
I thought it wise.
That's lovely. What do you think? Is there a move, and Ajit, you can jump in as well because you have large numbers of employees and all of that, a compensation. Are we largely a country that's still driven by pay than stock ownership? And would that have some positive or negative impact on some of these folks who are used to that kind of compensation plan?
Yeah. I think John Keells is probably the exception with the stock options. A large number of companies are still driven by the pay. You do have the profit-related pay, so it isn't just bonuses. I know many of our companies have that element built in, so depending on performance, you can have profit-related pay. But if you come from an environment in which you're used to stock options, my understanding is that you don't have a large number of companies in Sri Lanka offering that. I think we have some way to go on that.
Ajit, how has this worked? Because you have seen this change happen over the years. What has been the impact?
Yeah, we've had stock options for almost 15 years, and we found that it truly drives performance and ensures retention of the right people. Our scheme effectively is that we pay at the median. So not 75th, 50th percentile, but the stock options can take you beyond 150%. It's created a huge amount of wealth in the organization. And I think it's very positive, and it's something that all organizations should do. Structured right, you can keep your fixed costs down, but have a huge kicker on performance.
Yeah. Okay. We have a minute and a half, and we need a little time for the panelists to give their final thoughts. But one last question from the audience.
Thank you for all the panelists for being here. My name is Nazwan Baba. I'm an associate at an IT management consulting firm in Washington, D.C. My question is about, building off of that, about transparency and information related to benefits and compensation. As a prospective returnee, I would love to be back in Sri Lanka, and I'm sure my fellow returnees would be as well. But in addition to all the benefits, the economic viability of returning back to Sri Lanka is a concern that we do have. And in the US, you can look at sites like Glassdoor or PayScale to kind of get a sense of what the median is or what the 77th percentile is. In Sri Lanka, it seems a bit hard to navigate, and my question is for the panel, how would you advise us as prospective returnees to get a better flavor of what that compensation looks like for the positions that we want to consider if we want to this thing? I understand that Sri Lanka is a great place and there's so many benefits in addition to economics, but the economic viability of returning is something that is a grave concern. So how do you navigate that?
Who'd like to go at that?
I know you all didn't want this
No,
question.
you don't have, it's not transparent. That's absolutely right. It's a bit of a problem for people like you who want to get a view of it. You have no choice but to go and talk to a few people. You have absolutely no choice.
I was about to say that, yeah.
There's no point beating around the bush.
Yeah,
Just
you want to add to that?
You have to go around talking to a few people, and you'll find compensation sort of varies quite a lot, but that's the only way to do it.
I mean, I can give you an example just to substantiate that. A friend of mine who went to university with me in the US migrated to New Zealand, and a few years back he came back to Sri Lanka, and when he was offered the job, he just called me and asked, what do you think? You know, should I accept this kind of salary scale? Similarly, another friend of mine who's now doing a fairly good job in San Francisco has been offered a job here, and he called me and asked me, you know, what do you think of this? This is what I'm offered, should I take it or not? So similarly, you know, at your age level, I'm sure you have many friends here, just ask around and yeah.
Okay.
If I could just add to that
yeah,
as well.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in the IT management consulting field, what happens is there are going to be bases that you would make in Sri Lanka, but if you were willing to travel outside of Sri Lanka, having your base here, I think there'd be definitely incentives and kickers on that, which would make it very competitive. So that's, I think, for your sort of line of business, you would probably need to look at a job that's outward facing, you know, based in Sri Lanka. So that might be more useful for you.
Thank you very much. Time's up. In fact, we are just 4 minutes over time. So just to wrap things up, I would like to invite the panelists to give their final thoughts. And since you went first, Hiran, we'll have Ajit go first this time.
Well, I think everything that had to be said has been said. From a Work in Sri Lanka perspective, I'll just reiterate what I mentioned at the beginning, which is Sri Lanka has its problems. It's not going to go away. Take that as a given. But based on where we are in terms of our location, the opportunity in an environment of peace, the massive economy next door, which is growing and will continue to grow, the Southeast Asian region, and China, all within striking distance. The view that we are taking as an organization is that the next 20 years will be one of exponential growth and significant opportunity. So look, we are looking at it very positively.
I would say something similar. Despite all the pessimism, there is also optimism. This country is developing. You will see a lot of growth. If you're smart, capable, and of an entrepreneurial bent, this is definitely the place for you because you will see opportunities that you don't see elsewhere. So I would encourage at least some of you to come back in Sri Lanka and give it a chance. If nothing else, you get a lot of holiday with your job.
That's not as productive though. But yes, from my perspective, I'm a living example. I came back here 20 years ago, and I always had a vision of myself becoming a leader in Sri Lanka and taking business out to the rest of the world. So anything is possible. It's just that you've got to have the right attitude. You've got to be able to deal with the challenges. And I've become cynical over time with the politics, the economy, and so on. But as Ajit said, despite it all, you've just got to drive forward. And that's been my motto. And I think all of you who have the chance to come back, whether it's for family, whether it's for other aspects, you know, I think you should really think about it hard, do the homework, and look at companies that are progressing, the companies on this panel are companies that are opportunities, you know, in terms of the global village, as we call it. So thank you and good luck.
So it's all about walk the talk, right? And from our experience, let me just tell you that we've just doubled capacity. And in addition to that, we bought land around our plant to go 2.5 times beyond doubling our capacity. Okay, so that just tells you, we are not looking at a year, we are not looking at 2 years down the road, not even 5. We are looking way longer term. And, you know, Sri Lanka it's got its challenges, there's no doubt about it. Every country has, but Sri Lanka's also got its opportunities. And if we focus on those opportunities and we go after them, I think Sri Lanka will do really well. And it's like being a surfer. You know, you got to catch the wave when the wave happens, not after the wave hits the shore. So Sri Lanka at this moment in time is where the wave is getting to its highest. It's not near its highest, it's getting there. So get on it now before the wave hits the shore. That to me would be the message to you guys. Thank you.
I think stay where your heart is. You know, what you feel like doing most. You know, I have people who love being outside Sri Lanka, and obviously 20 million people live here, and they love it living here. So if you feel like, you know, this is the place for you to live, don't worry about anything, just be here. I mean, I have had the opportunity to live in the US, having graduated there, but I came back in '87, probably spent 2 of the worst years of my life, '87 to '89. I don't think many of you will remember that period. Was the worst ever. You know, killings here, killings there, everywhere. And, you know, company was about to close down. And my father at that time said, just keep focused on what you're doing and keep going. And he started investing at that time. And my sister and I thought he was mad to be investing in hotels at that time. Who would come? And he actually bought hotels. The St. Andrews Hotel was bought in 1987. And when our company had little money, and he said, write a check and Edgar Gunatunga will honor the check. That's how that property was bought, you know. And that's, you have to have patience, you have to have love. You know, love for the country. If you feel that you belong here, you'll make it here. If you have doubts, then stay where your doubt is.
Thank you. And as for me, my parting words would be, Sri Lanka has been called many things, the Pearl of the Indian Ocean, the Granary of the East, but I think my most favorite is what the Arabs called us, Serendib, and from which of course the word serendipity comes, a chance happening that will be a happy or bring you some happy or in a happy or beneficial way. So my invitation is for you to come, take your chance. It could come your way. Thank you very much. Thank you, members of the panel, and thank you all for your patience and your contribution to the event. And thank WISL for organizing this wonderful event to bring people together, industry and folks. Thank you very much. Have a pleasant evening. Thank you.